Well, welcome back to another session. I hope you are well. Today, I will be building on the conversation that we started some sessions ago. The theme is still the same, the masculine burden of performance. But in today's session, let me develop the concept slightly more. Just to recap, in yesterday's session, I talked about the importance of success. The importance of success if you are a man, and how to win the success game, to win in the game of life, um, sometimes you do not always have to know the right numbers. You just simply have to understand how not to pick the wrong numbers. In other words, a negative art to life. Negative art meaning that you're not playing the positive game, which is to be successful, but you're simply playing the negative art, which is simply to avoid failing. And by doing so, you will find success. I know this is not about yesterday's session, but to make this more concrete, let me ask you a few questions before I answer the questions. Think about this carefully, how you would have responded to them. As a matter of fact, once I'm done, press pause, try to answer the questions before you continue and before hearing my responses or my answers. Number one, let's assume you were investing and I came to you and I took some of your funds and I was going to invest the funds for you. And the purpose was to grow your funds, to create more wealth, and so that you will be more successful financially. If for whatever reason, the market went down by 10%, that's the first question. How much would I, in other words, I representing you, but also you being the owner of the funds, how much would the market have to go up by? And how much would I have to make to break back even to where I was before the market went down? The first position is 10%. Second position, 15%. Third position, 20%. Fourth position, 30%. Fifth position, say 45%. Sixth position, 50%. Seventh position, 75%. Eighth position, 90%. We stop at number 8. How much would I need to break back even, and how much would I need to gain back in order to break back even to where I was before the market went negative? Here are some of the answers. Forgive me if I get this wrong. I'm giving you this as I try to do the numbers in my head. 10%. If the market went down by 10%, I would have to make back, you would have to make back 11% just to break even. It doesn't seem too big. It doesn't seem like a big mistake. 10% down, 11% to make it back to where you were, easy. 15%. You'd have to make back 18%. 20%, you would have to make back 25%. Now, can you see that in the first 20% of your life, the errors you make are not that significant? It starts to change. 30%, I'd have to make back 43%. Now it starts to seem a bit heavy. If the market went down by 45%, I would have to make back approximately 78, 79%. Starts to seem a bit heavy now. See, we've gone past the 30% threshold. If the market went down by 50%, I would have to make back 100% in order to break even to where I was before the market went down. If the market went down by 75%, I would have to make back 333% to break even. If the market went down by 90%, I would have to make back 900% in order to break even. Here's a simple logic. On average, over the past 70, 80 years, if we use the S&P 500 index, the low-cost index fund, the average return is 10% per year. So we start from the beginning again. The market went down, just say for, you might say in this particular instance, for a few weeks or for a month, by 10%. If I have to make back 11%, it would be the same as the annual return on an annual basis over the past 50 years. So it would take me a year If the market went down and I'm going to jump by 30% and I had to make back 43%, assuming 10% return every single year, it would take me 4 years, all things remaining equal, to break back even to where I was. Here's a key question. If the market went down by 75% and I had to make back 333% to break back even, assuming 10% return per year, it would take me 33 years and roughly 5 months to break back even to where I was. This is the negative art of investing. It simply tells you, protect the downside. Risk control should be your most important focus. If you minimize the downside, then you maximize the upside by simply recognizing that you don't have to work as hard just to break back even before you start to grow. Now, we're not talking about investing in today's session. I use that example to explain the negative art that I covered yesterday and that I will use as the basis of the conversations going forward is just to simply say, like someone running a hurdle race, you have obstacles in your way. Most people are running blindfolded. They have an idea about the target and they're just running. You have to know how to run with wisdom, and you have to know where the obstacles may be, and you have to plan for them, and you have to be ready to avoid the obstacles. The negative art of life is simply saying, identify what could be the downside and just avoid them, because you minimize the investment of resources, the waste of your time, and you can live a good life. You eliminate the extremes, you would do just fine as a man. Now let me move into today's session. I covered in yesterday's session the importance of keeping the focus on your purpose. 95% of your time, resources, attention, focus, your purpose. And I made reference to the fact that women, we love them. We cannot live without them. We need them. But at the wrong time, what is good for you can actually create a negative unintended consequences in your life. So much so that you can sacrifice your purpose, your dream, your vision, simply because a decision to ejaculate goes awry. It's important that I would recommend to young men particularly that if you can, whenever you can, you try to control as much as you can your appetite. Now let me start today's session therefore by talking about something that most of you may have come across. It's called the 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins has references that root back to biblical theology and the great teachings, but it shows up in every single form of theology in one form or another. In other words, it's encouraging you to control your appetites. Gluttony, lust, greed, envy, wrath, vain or vainness, or vainglory, and pride. 7 deadly sins. Now, as a young man, if you want to be successful, if you can avoid these 7 deadly sins, you will find your success unexpected in uncommon hours. Lust is connected with what we covered in a brief moment in yesterday's session. I will expand on that. I'm going to use the 7 deadly sins to show how the masculine burden of performance is made easier, and the journey towards success as a man is made easier if you understand how to avoid the deadly sins. Now, understand, and I should make it very clear, when I use the word sin, it usually evokes a lot of emotional responses from people. People think I'm talking about religion and Christianity and Judaism and Islam and all of that. No, I'm not talking about theology. I'm talking about the original definition of the word sin, which simply means, from Aramaic, to miss the mark. In archery, you take an aim, you miss, they said you one sin. In other words, you miss the target. You have so much potential as a man. Whenever you strive away from that potential, one sin, you've missed the mark. So if I woke up in the morning and there were things I was supposed to do in order to move me in the direction of my goal, if I missed the mark, is one sin. As a man, if you can master the 7 deadly sins, you will find that success becomes easy and your journey towards manhood is much faster. Now let me start by saying as follows. Whatever controls, or rather, whatever masters you as a man controls your life. It wasn't a play on words. I didn't say whatever you master. I said whatever masters you controls you, or controls your life. So it's a simple question usually when I speak with men. I don't ask the question, but I try to glean from my interactions with them what possibly could be controlling their lives. And when I cannot find that, I try to find out what has mastered them. Sometimes, if we do not know how to control our appetite, and usually our appetite masters us and therefore controls our lives. Let me perhaps say something that I think is key. Now, if of everything I share in today's session, you miss this particular statement, then I think you've missed something very valuable. So if there's one thing you're going to take away from today's session, it is as follows. We all have needs as men. We as men all have needs. And here is the statement. It's important to understand that as a man, there are some needs that you are born with. Number two, there are some needs of yours that are seasonal. Number three, there are some needs of yours that are cultivated. You're born with needs that are seasonal, needs that you cultivate. You develop an appetite, you develop a taste for such needs. Now, I said a few seconds ago to control your appetite. Keep that word at the back of your memory as we go through this session, appetites. The needs you're born with are biological. Those biological needs kick in at certain times in your life. It's possible to bring it closer. Now, for example, we understand and we know puberty in women occurs, usually in the West, around a certain age. If you go back to the early 20th century, it was roughly about 16 and 17 in the United Kingdom. What we found and what the data showed, that women are going into puberty at 11 and 12. What we have been told and what the data is suggesting is that the absence of fathers catalyzes puberty in young girls when a father is not present. Put it in an inverse statement. When a father is present, or a masculine presence in a girl's life, either a guardian or a father, that presence delays puberty to the right time. In the absence of the man, puberty occurs at a faster rate because if the same girl goes in the proximity of a man with high testosterone, who is an attractive man, who is a driven man, who is a successful man, there is something biologically in a woman that activates that process. So, according to biology, if things remain equal and at the right time, things will follow a sequence. Just like in men and boys, we go through adolescence, and we go through stages of our life, and suddenly we start to produce this testosterone. However, it can begin much earlier. So you're born with certain needs, and you need not worry about that need if you're born with the need, because it's supposed to be conditioned and programmed into your system that all things remaining equal, it's not there to harm you. As a matter of fact, it works beautifully well. Seasonal needs start from the phase of boyhood towards manhood. In other words, there's a time when a man needs a certain thing, and if you are in a relationship, it's important to understand when that need will come and when it leaves. We have seasons. We have summer. When we go from summer, we go into autumn, then we go into winter, then we come into spring. Seasons. You do not wear the same clothes in winter as you did in the summer, and vice versa. Seasonal needs. But the key part of what I think is the obstacle to men's success is cultivated needs. The appetites we develop. Some of those appetites come as a result of what we see, what we hear, the influence around us. For some young men, it begins with porn or video games. Now, video games do not have anything wrong with them, but too much of anything means that you are misusing the purpose of something. Young men these days are developing cultivated tastes online. Porn, any form of sexualization, and that is creating an appetite, an energy divergence or distraction that is not going into creativity. So suddenly we're developing a need that cannot be satiated and therefore will cause us to sacrifice our ultimate purpose to satisfy that need. For example, let's go talk about Samson. Samson was, for those who believe in the storyline, was supposed to be a great warrior, someone who's supposed to have liberated his people, supposed to be a judge, and a very strong, decisive leader. But Samson did not follow the instructions of his father, and therefore developed a taste, an appetite for a certain type of woman who his parents told him not to go with. The woman led him to his death. Now, I'm not blaming the woman. No, I'm blaming Samson's lack of appetite control. You as a man have to understand your tastes, what you need, and the taste that you're cultivating on an ongoing basis. And if you can understand the next statement I'm about to make, which is to avoid the pitfalls, and always remember to stop at the pit stops. I think that's important. Avoid the pitfalls and remember to stop at the pit stops. In other words, if you avoid the pitfalls in life, then it means you're not going to be led into harm's way. You wouldn't even have to ask for forgiveness. You wouldn't have to ask for miracles. You would simply be in your place of purpose, always. Remembering to stop at the pit stop simply means that you don't run on empty and then get stopped in the middle of the desert, the wilderness, with no reserve. Think about Formula One racing. You race and race and race, but at some point you have to come in, get your tires changed, refuel, and start again. As men, success only happens at the speed of your pit stops. Let me say that again. Success only happens for men at the speed and timing of your pit stops. Most young men, and I know this from my experience, you start the race, you have a full tank, and you think, I need to get there so soon that you don't take breaks. And in my case, I did the same thing. You get on the road, you got a full tank, and you're steaming. You're steaming without reference to speed limits, the quantity of fuel you have in your tank, or even the signals the car is giving you. And the result of which is, at some point in time, something fails. And then you find yourself stuck on the motorway on a hard shoulder, waiting for a pickup truck to come and rescue you from something that could have been avoided. In some cases, you wait too long, and every other car is going past. Whereas, if you simply recognize that service stations are pit stops, you drive into the service station, you give the car a few seconds to cool down, you get yourself a drink, you stretch, you get some fresh air, and then you start again. Many years ago, I traveled from the south of Wales to the north of Scotland. I went to work that particular day. I woke up at 6 in the morning, got to work, finished work at roughly about 5:30. At 6:30, I was in the car. I set off. And I drove for roughly 12 hours. A journey that should have taken me 7 hours, max. It took that long. Why? I was tired. I wasn't reading the signs well. I didn't have a backup map. I was using a sat-nav. At some point in the journey, the sat-nav failed. And I found myself going into motorways and having to drive for a few hours and turn around and come back, get on the same lane. I was exhausted. By the time I got to north of Scotland, it was morning. People were just about to start work. I was exhausted. Here's the most important thing. Along the way, my eagerness to get to my destination and my tiredness and my lack of taking pit stops and allowing myself to breathe caused me to go down the wrong slip road, and I was traveling in the opposite direction Imagine this. I am traveling up a slip road, the wrong slip road, and cars are coming down at, call it 50, 60 miles an hour. I should have been dead, but I was lucky. As I went down the slip road, or up the slip road, I noticed something. Something said to me, I don't think you're on the right side of the road. I was exhausted, I was tired. So I hit my brakes immediately because I noticed that the other cars, the cars that should have been coming down the slip road, I saw some going the other way, staying on the main motorway. And I realized I was on the wrong side of the road. So I made a U-turn very quickly. Luckily, no cars, no police, no harm, no injury, no death. Why? I didn't plan my journey properly. I didn't include pit stops. I didn't include time to stay at service stations and to recoup. Why? I was in a hurry to get to my destination. What should have taken me less time, usually 6 hours, max 6.5 if you're slow, 7 if there's huge back traffic, took me almost 13 plus hours. It took me almost twice the time. Why? I did not plan to avoid pitfalls, and I did not stop at the pit stops. As a man, to be successful, you have to play this game of both. Remember to stop, to get some recharge, refuel, get some motivation, and start again. Actually, stop, make sure you're on the right lane. Make sure you've been traveling in the right direction. Most people have their ladders of success against the wrong building. They climb all the way to the top and realize, oh shit, this was the wrong building. They come all the way back down and they move their ladder to the other building. Time wasted, a life lost. Now, as I move forward, as I talk about these 7 deadly sins, I should say something that I think is key, because the first that I'm going to speak about is gluttony. I'm not going to talk about gluttony from the perspective of food. I'm going to talk about gluttony from the perspective of a man's desire for something that perhaps he doesn't yet deserve or hasn't reached the status where he qualifies for that. To do that, let me juxtapose something that I think is key. Society, from a traditional perspective, provided us with a purpose, reason for being. From those reasons, we developed roles. Those roles created responsibilities. 2 responsibilities assigned to men was provision and protection. Protection simply meant we became disposable as men. So we got our purpose from having to go out and fight to protect our community, our nation, our people. So we actually became dispensable objects to ensure that our lineage continued. We were compensated in some way or form. So we were protecting and we were providing by virtue of the fact that we either were compensated by the government or by the army. Protection provision has been the most important responsibilities the men were assigned over the past 100 years. Things have changed. We've solved the issue about safety. We've solved the issue about the need for survival. And so most men do not need to provide protection because we already have that and we live in relative peace in the West. Most men, therefore, do not have a sense of purpose. But what we still have is that responsibility from the role we had previously in the past, which is the need to provide. The need to provide, however, in the social media day and age has exacerbated one of the sins, and many of the 7 deadly sins, one of which is gluttony. I remember growing up, the whole idea that I knew what the neighbor had was absurd. Except I walked into his house, I did not know. Or except I heard him tell someone, didn't know. In this social media era we live in, people are sharing their lives, and therefore it's possible to look online and feel that your life is not complete because you do not measure up to something that is a creation or something that is either true or not true, but based on what other people and the lives they're leading. So we are constantly measuring up with other people. Now this will bring me to envy, jealousy, which I will not be talking about in today's session, but gluttony is a huge one. At a young age, therefore, young men are being raised and conditioned to be providers, when they haven't developed the intellect, the ability, the temperament, the wisdom, the character, and the manhood that comes with provision. There was a time when you did not send young boys out. During the hunter-gatherer days, you did not send young boys to go out and hunt. Hunting was supposed to be for the older men. Why? Because we knew instinctively that the wilder beasts, the beasts of the field, will kill them. Even the experienced hunters, the women of the community, kissed their husbands every morning when they set off to go find game, because they realized, even though they were very skilled, the probability of success was very low, but more importantly, that the probability that they would return in one piece was minuscule. We do not send young men out to hunt, but we do so in a different way. We simply say, you have to provide as a man. And so young men are being asked to do things. Young boys are being asked to do things that mature men have been learning and been trying to do for decades. And that is creating what is gluttony in most young men. Provision creates greed. Provision and the need to provide at the wrong time creates envy. The expectation of provision develops an appetite for gluttony. There are some needs as a man you're born with. There are some needs that are seasonal. There are many needs that you cultivate. Gluttony, envy, greed is a cultivated need, partly because of societal pressures, but also partly because of familial pressures. Your mum saying, I know you will buy this for me when you get money. And that creates a need for you to do something that perhaps you do not, and are not willing or able to do at that particular point. But to make her proud, you do whatever it takes, whether it's moral or immoral. In the sessions to follow, I'm going to talk about the importance of mastering gluttony. If you can master the 7 deadly sins on your path to success, you will find actually that the journey of success becomes easy. Now let me end today's session with a conversation that I had some time ago. I was with some loved ones and friends, and I met some new people I'd never met before. And in the conversation we started, in speaking with some of the guys who were there, I remember saying to one of the young men, or one of the men, all of them were young, but one of the men particularly was junior to me, and we were talking about investing. And I said, and I think this is key, if you can take this, in addition to what I've shared so far, I think you do well as a young man. Investing and making money is supposed to be boring. Going broke and losing money is exciting. Here's the reason. Investing is an intellectual, rational, sports, game, lifestyle, process, procedure. Emotions is the enemy of the rational investor. To be a good investor, you have to be logical and you have to be rational. You have to set your emotions aside. Your enemy is your emotions. If you put your emotions aside, then you're acting like a zombie. You're following strict rules, which means a life without emotions has to be boring. So making money and investing should be boring. If you find you're excited about making money, it means you have emotions in the process. It doesn't mean you don't have to be excited about the possibility of making money, but I'm saying in the decision-making process. The enemy of a rational investor is his or her emotions. Similarly, going broke, losing money is exciting. Why? Think about this whole concept of fear of missing out. People hear a concept, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon, you take all of the wealth you have, sometimes you even borrow using leverage, and you invest much more. Why? The excitement of wanting to make money, which is when most people lose. When the market is signaling that it's time to be excited, when there's enthusiasm, euphoria, you as an investor should be the opposite. When the market is greedy, it's time for you as an investor to be very careful and pessimistic. When the market is pessimistic, it's not for you to be greedy. You're swinging in a manner that is slightly opposite, not always. I'm not saying just be a contrarian for the sake of it, but here's the key thing. By avoiding yourself of the emotions, you're able to think logically and rationally. I want you to take the same approach as a man towards your success, which is to simply say, there is a time for emotions, and there's a time when emotions must be put aside to make sure that you're making decisions for the long term. Now, the marshmallow test is one that talks about delayed gratification. A few kids are put in a room. The teacher says, well, you see that marshmallow? You can have it, it's yours. But if you wait, I'm going to leave the classroom, and you wait until I return, I'll give you another marshmallow. And he leaves, and the kids are being monitored. Some of them cannot control their appetite. They take the marshmallow immediately and eat it. A few of them wait, and he returns and he gives them an extra marshmallow. And these kids were tracked for many years into the future, and they found that those who had the ability to control and delay their gratification were able to achieve much more success compared to the men and the women, or the boys and the girls, who could not control their appetites and who could not go through delayed gratification. As a man, the 7 deadly sins will master you if you do not know how to delay gratification, put your emotions aside, sometimes think logically and rationally, and play the long game. Playing the long game is the path to success. And that simply means sometimes you're going to have to sacrifice who you are today for the possibility of who you might become. And think about this. A caterpillar has to go through a process of being born again. It dies to its old self to come into something new, a butterfly. But here is what's sad and what is also beautiful. At the point where it becomes a butterfly, so you have this beautiful creature, but it only has a very short life. That is the pathway of success for a man. In this particular instance, Jesus, 30 years of preparation, 3 years of ministry. Moses, almost 70 years of preparation, the latter years of his life, ministry. Abraham, decades of preparation, a few years of ministry. The key to success for a man is the ratio between your years of preparation and the years of ministry. You see, in this day and age, we've inversed and reversed that formula. The 80-20, 90-10 rule, we've inverted it, and we're asking young men to only invest 10 years and to have 90 years of success. The formula doesn't work. Yes, are there exceptions to the rule? Of course. But the price of success has to be paid in full. The price of success has to be paid in advance. The price can be paid if you choose to, but if you do not pay the price, and if you're not willing to wait, you will find actually you will take shortcuts and you'll be drawn towards its appetites, one of which could be the 7 deadly sins that causes you to sabotage your future and your prosperity for something immediate that you want to gratify. Let me close with this. There is a season to sow. There is a season to reap. As a man and as a provider, as a protector, as a person who should bring purpose into the community, someone who should profess his love, as the priest, you cannot do both in the same season, and you cannot do both at the same time. I'll say it again as I close. There is a season to sow, and there is a season to reap. The separation of those seasons we call time. Preparation, nurturing, cultivating, or not cultivating, looking after. But you have to sow, you have to wait. Whilst you're waiting, you're working. Wait doesn't mean you sit back and just wait. You're working. And then at some point, harvest. Which is why most people say the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. People sow, they do not have delayed gratification, they are impatient, and they leave their soil because they think there will be no harvest, and they go to the next soil, the next farm, and they sow, and they move to the next farm and they sow, and eventually at the right time the harvest comes, but there is no one. There are no farmers, there are no laborers to gather the spoils. Many years ago I talked about something that I think is fascinating. If you were to get a seed or a crop and you put it in the soil and you water it, in a relatively short time, you start to see signs that something is happening. However, there is a particular crop, that once planted, for the first roughly almost 4.5 years, nothing happens. You water the soil, you nurture the soil, you look after the soil, protect the soil, nothing happens. In the 5th year, or going into the 5th year, within the first few weeks, that particular crop bursts through the soil, and in such a short time, it grows more than 90 feet tall. As a matter of fact, people have said that you could actually stand by the soil and watch the plant grow before your eyes. But here's the key part of the whole process. Question. 2 days after you sowed the crop and you saw nothing, are you discouraged? Do you walk away and go to another soil? 365 days after you planted, do you walk away? 2 years after you planted, do you walk away? 3 years after you planted, do you walk away? Most young men, walk away because they haven't learned or mastered delayed gratification and the importance of recognizing that there is a season to sow, there is a season to reap. You can't do both in the same season. Now, I hope today's session has been useful. I think in tomorrow's session, I'm going to cover, or in the next session, whenever that happens, I will cover gluttony, and I'll start to build on these 7 deadly sins. And again, let me reiterate the reason why I'm covering these topics. I'm not covering the topics because they sound interesting. I'm covering the topics because, Tiger Woods is a phenomenal golfer. Roger Federer is a phenomenal tennis player. You tend to find that with great players, Tiger Woods has a few people watching him swing when he plays golf. Why? He cannot see the blind spots and he cannot see himself swing. So he needs, now remember when he started, we didn't have this playback technology where things could be videoed and he could replay and pause and analyze and watch and contrast. We didn't have this back then. So he needed people to watch him swing, to be his eyes and to be his mouth and guide him so he could improve himself. Tiger needed coaches to watch him swing. If you want to be successful, some of the ideas I'm sharing, they're not necessarily meant to make you successful. They're simply meant to be like eyes telling you there's an obstacle coming up, slow down. It's similar to Google Maps. As you drive, you hear an indication that there is a traffic camera coming soon. Slow down your speed. Through the process of inversion, if you avoid the obstacles in your way, you will get to your destination much faster and safer than if you simply went full on speed without avoiding the pitfalls and without any pit stops. Now, I hope today's session has been useful.